Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what we're going to be talking about over the next 4 weeks, right? Lesson one is we're going to talk about BA in general, and then we'll go into the core knowledge areas of business analysis, and we're going to talk about a few key concepts, right? It's important for you to grasp the key concepts because when we get into lessons 3 to 10, I'm going to be working with the assumption that you understand what the key concepts are. So when we talk about them, if you don't understand, that would be the class to ask me about it. Now, having said that, that's not to say you can never ask me about key concepts even when we get to lesson 3, right? But I'd rather you ask the question up front. That way, we lay a proper foundation and we can build lessons 3 to 10 on that, okay? Lesson 3 is where we go into the business case, right? I'll teach you about it, and then I'll do a presentation to you, okay? Again, like I mentioned earlier on, once I'm done presenting it to you, you will then have time to prepare your own business case, right? And then present it to everybody on the call. Lesson 4, we're going to go into software development life cycle. And basically what that means is that, we all have these different applications that we use today. Even some of those applications on our phones, right? How did those applications come to be? Did somebody just sit in a room and program it? Like, what was the process? How did they create it? How did they test it? How did they roll it out to you, the end user? We're going to talk about all of that. In lesson 5, we're going to talk about your approach as a BA. What does it mean when I get that solid job, right? How do I approach it? They talk about requirement gathering. Where do I even start from? How do I know what I'm supposed to say when I open my mouth on day 1? Okay? And then we'll talk about stakeholder management, right? A lot of what you're going to do as a BA is that you're going to be talking to people called stakeholders. They're basically people who have a stake in the project that you're working on. They could be the end user. They could be the one dropping the money for the project, but in one way or another, they have a vested interest in the project. And as a BA, a lot of what you do is going to center around managing that relationship with them. When you're working with a group of stakeholders, there's some people you need to keep very happy. There's some people that you need to keep informed. They need to know what is going on. How do you know as a BA who needs to be happy and who needs to be informed? Okay. In actual BA terminology, they don't call it happy, but I like to call it happy because those people, when they become unhappy with you, they can make your life miserable. Okay. In lesson 6, we're going to go into the requirements, elicitation, and collaboration. I'm sure virtually everybody on this call has heard that word requirement before. Okay. BAs gather requirements a lot. That's usually what people are hired to do. Okay. Lesson 7, we're going to talk about, okay, now that you've gathered the requirements, how do you move the requirement? How do you move it through? Some projects last 2 years. You gathered requirements in month 3. What are you going to be doing with your time in the 1 year and 9 months that is left, right? We talk about the life cycle of the requirement. And at this point, we'll talk about how to use Jira. Once we talk about how to use Jira, because we would have talked about requirement gathering, right? It will then be time for you to deliver on project 2. Lesson 8, we're going to talk about current state, future state, design, decision, and how to use Visio. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to know and understand how to do current state and future state. Just to give you a bit of insight, a company says we're going to be spending $5 million in 2023 to improve on this thing or to create a new application. $5 million is a lot of money, right? How do they determine what that money is going to be spent on? How do they determine what the future would look like after spending $5 million? That is where current state and future state comes in. Current state is we're trying to understand what we do today, how we do it, and why we do it that way. And are there any problems with it? Right? Once we have that understanding, we then need to define what we want the future to look like. Nobody leaves destination A without trying to get to destination B or C or D, right? Typically, when you say I want to get to a particular place, you're ready to leave where you are currently to get to that future. Okay? But if you don't know where you're coming from, you become a bit disoriented on figuring out how to get to where you're going to. Because sometimes people say, why are we wasting time understanding the current state? We already know the current state is problematic. Why are we even still dwelling on it? Why can't we just go to the future? The reason you need to know the current state before going to the future is that if you're not careful, you're going to replicate the current state in the future. You're going to spend the $5 million, and all you'd have done is you'd have recreated today's problem, just painted it a different color. Okay, and so that's why we're going to do current state and future state and design decision, and we're going to talk about how to use Visio as well. Okay. Then we're going to talk about how to analyze the requirement. Now you've gathered the requirements. They've told you they want a Mercedes and they want the plate to be gold and they want the windows to be diamond and they want all these things. As a BA, you know your $5 million cannot deliver everything they've asked for. How do you figure out what you're going to deliver and what will not be delivered? How do you analyze the requirement to even see if it makes sense at all? How do you analyze the requirement to determine if it is a need or a want? And we're going to have that conversation in lesson 9. Lesson 10 is where we're going to talk about the solution evaluation, which is basically, now we've delivered the solution, was it worth it? The future state that we defined, did we actually achieve it? Okay, and that's what we're going to do in lesson 10. So typically, I wouldn't ask questions in the middle of a class. I would wait till the end, but I'm going to do it differently just for this class, right? I've just walked through, at a high level, what we're going to be talking about in lessons 1 to 10. Does anybody have any questions before we jump into lesson 1?
Please raise your hand if you do, and then I can unmute you.
There are no questions? Okay. Sounds like we're all doing great. Okay, so we're going to get into lesson 1.
Someone has a question?
Someone has a question?
1 second, yeah.
Go ahead, please, if you have a question.
Okay, so to re-emphasize, are we going to have individual assignments like projects, or everything will be in groups?
Everything will be in groups. There are no individual assignments.
All right, sure. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Any other question? Okay, if there is no other question, we'll go into lesson 1. It was mentioned at the beginning of the class that you're going to be able to view the recording within 24 hours, I believe. So feel free to actually focus on class and, let's have this conversation, listen to what I'm teaching, take notes if you need to. If you have questions, make note of your questions, put in the chat or ask after the class, right? But just, try to focus on imagining the picture that I will be painting. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what is business analysis? What does it entail? Why are these people making money? Why is anybody even hiring them? Why do companies think it's worth it hiring a BA and paying a few $100,000 a year? For the companies that pay, not every company does, right? Okay. So business analysis is basically the act of making change happen. And how do we make the change happen? We identify a need, and then we look for a solution that can meet the need. Okay? How do we identify the need? We have a team in our company, the accounting team or the accounting department. They've been complaining for 2 years now how the application they're using is not helping with the calculation that needs to be done, and they're having to do a lot of manual calculation, which is leading to a lot of errors, which is making the company lose money. Okay? There is a need for a change right there. And the need is based on a pain point that the accounting department has. Highlight the word pain point. Usually, companies spend money to eliminate a pain point. Obviously, it's not a physical pain, but it could be a pain that is affecting the books of the company. For example, the accounting issue that I just mentioned. Now, when we're trying to fix that issue for the accounting department, and maybe there are multiple departments that have an issue with this application that we're using, okay? When we're trying to fix it, one of the things we can do is that we can buy a new application and implement that application. We can retire the current application we have, okay, and implement a new application. That would fall under software implementation. But sometimes it is not even software implementation you need. People just need to work differently. I don't know if you've been in a situation where you're in a company and somebody says, we've been doing it that way for 30 years, and you're trying to, you don't want to step on their toes, but you're trying to help them understand, yeah, you've been doing it wrong for 30 years. We do not need to do it wrong for another 30 years, basically. You just need to change how you do what you do. An example of that would be, so when this bill comes into the organization, it goes to the clerical team, and the clerical team will vet all the numbers, and they will make an extra copy and take that extra copy to the accounting department. And in the accounting department, somebody will then key in that data into the system. And then when they key it into the system will take the data, process it, do what it needs to do with it. Okay? Now, because it first went to the clerical team before going to the accounting team, they already wasted 2 days there. And then the accounting team manually enters it into the system. Okay, the company says, you know what, we're going to change that process. What we're going to do is that when this bill comes in, this paper bill comes in, it's going to be scanned and automatically routed to the accounting department. They haven't implemented a new solution. They've always had a scanner at work. They basically just changed the process of how they work. Okay? Sometimes it's an organizational change or strategic planning. The key here being that it's not all the time that a BA is working on an application implementation. Sometimes what you're doing is process change. When you do the current state, you map it out and you define the future state and you map it out. They may not even implement a new tool. They're just going to look at that current state and say, oh, we can see that at point 2, point 10, and point 15, these steps are unnecessary. If we cut it out, it's going to make things more efficient. That would be an example of a process change. Okay? Business analysis can also be used to understand the current state and to define the future state and to determine what needs to be done to get from the current state to the future state. If you were driving from, I live in British Columbia, right? So let's say I was driving from British Columbia to Ontario, right? I need to know the distance so that I can calculate how much gas I'll need so that I would make sure I have enough cash or enough money in my checking account, or I have a credit card to pay. I need to know how many days it will take me so that I know if I need to book a hotel and, stop for a night. Basically, I need to understand everything that will be involved in getting me from point A to point B. In the context of an organization, when they've determined that they need to implement a new tool, they need to understand what will it cost us to buy the tool? How many licenses are we going to need to pay for? How frequently are we going to need to pay for the licenses? What will the team that will implement the application look like? Do we need a project manager? Do we need a scrum master? Do we need a BA? Do we need QA? Do we need to buy new servers? Okay, how much training are we going to need to do to train the people on the new application? Okay, now that I'm talking about these things, I hope it's helping you, painting that picture in your mind to say, oh, it's not just going from application A to application B. There are many things that need to happen in between moving from the current state to getting to the future state. And a lot of times, they're going to need you as a BA to help them identify these things. Okay. Going to the next slide. Now comes in the business analyst, right? What are you going to be spending your time on? Some of the things I'm going to go over here are things that as a BA on your day-to-day, these are things that you're going to be doing. You're going to examine the client or the customer or the organization, right? And you're examining them, trying to understand what they do today, but looking at the future. A BA is always looking for how to improve on something. How can I make it better? How can I make it faster? How can I make it more efficient? How can I reduce the number of errors that we're getting today? Okay? A BA oftentimes is an intermediary between the business and the technical team. So there's this story that floats around, right? That There was a time when, hiring BAs was not really a thing. If the business needed something to be done in the system, they basically pull the technical team, so like the developer, the QA, pull them together, excuse me, communicate to them what needs to be done. And the technical team will go with that information and go build it. What they were finding was that, technical people can be very technical sometimes. And when you tell them something, the way they've imagined it may be completely different from how the business actually imagined it. That's on one hand. On the other hand, the business can be very vague when they're telling you what they need. Business will say something like, I am hungry, right? At the first mention of I'm hungry, you think, okay, that's pretty easy. You're hungry, you need food, right? I mean, that's how anybody would want to interpret it, but a BA would never interpret that way. You're hungry. Do you have any dietary restrictions? Are you lactose intolerant? Do you eat carbohydrates? And if you eat carbohydrate, do you eat refined carbohydrate? If you don't ask these questions, what's going to happen is that the technical team is going to bring a nice looking meal, but something the business cannot digest. And the technical team would have gone up and spent $1 million building it, only for the business to realize that it doesn't meet their need. So a company would rather hire a BA, right? Pay the BA 200 grand, have the BA grind through all the questions that need to be asked before the requirement gets to the technical team, so that the technical team builds it right. And that's why we often say a BA is an intermediary between the business and the technical team. A BA seeks to understand the pain points today. What is it about today that you do not like? Show me how you do your work today, and I want to see where your headache comes in. What point do you get to in your job that you feel like quitting because things just are not working? That is one of the things a BA seeks to understand. So a BA gathers all of that information, analyzes it, right? And then begin to document the requirements. I am hungry is not a requirement. Never has been, never will be. Okay? A baby who is hungry can feed on formula. So when the client tells you I'm hungry, you're like, how old are you? Right? Again, I'm giving all these very simple, non-technical examples because I need you to understand the concept of what we're talking about here. Why these questions are very important. Food means different things to different people. So if somebody says, I am hungry, it can't end there, at least from a BA standpoint. Okay? And a BA documents discoveries around the needs of a user in the form of requirements. So as you're having those conversations with the business, right? You book a meeting with the manager of accounting and you're like, tell me about your process, right? Okay, and they tell you when the accounting manager comes in, they run this report. When they run this report, they analyze it and then they give it to the assistant manager and they tell you about all of these things. And as you're listening to it as a BA, in your mind, you're thinking, but why are you doing these 10 things just to achieve one thing? Of course, you're not going to say that to them because you don't want them to feel like they're stupid, but you're beginning to think about all of those things. And in your mind, you're thinking, so if I eliminate steps 3, 4, and 5, will their work actually be better? Okay? You are thinking about all these things. But as they're talking to you, you're documenting. Sometimes you're recording, right? Because it's not easy to write, listen and write at the same time. That's actually a skill that takes time to develop. But sometimes you record it. Please note, never record the business until you get their permission. Don't even try to record secretly. People are going to tell you to do it. I'll tell you not to do it. Anybody should be okay with you recording. Now, you may be recording and they want to vent. Oftentimes, they would say, oh, can you stop the recording for a second? So they can vent. And yes, you're the BA, you will listen to the vent, right? And if they are venting while you're still recording, feel free to say, I'm okay pausing the recording and I can start it again when you want me to. Okay? Please note that. Okay. Oh, I should actually go into presentation mode. That skipped my mind. Okay. So what are the characteristics of a BA? A BA is bold. You're not shy to ask. And you're inquisitive. You want to know, you want to know, what's the reasoning behind what they're telling you. You do not take things at face value. Things like I'm hungry, you're not going to take it at face value. And you're not going to be afraid to ask questions. You want to know how. How is it done? When is it done? Who does it? What do they do? Why do they do it? Okay, a lot of the questions you're going to ask as a BA is going to start with one of these 5 things: how, when, who, what, why. Okay, a BA, a good BA understands that what is being said may sometimes not be what is intended. People have different communication skills. They say it in one way, but they mean something slightly different. And yes, it is your job as a BA to figure it out. I know someone is thinking, well, how am I supposed to know? I'm not in their mind, right? Absolutely, you're not in their mind. And that's why you're going to ask how, when, who, what, why. Why do you do it the way that you do it? Could you do it this other way? And they'll be like, oh, no, we can't do it the other way. Because if we do it the other way, we will be going against the regulatory body. And then as a BA, okay, yeah, I need to back off there. We don't want to go against the regulatory body, right? So you're going to ask all these probing questions. Sometimes you're going to ask questions that would warrant a yes or a no, but only in few cases, right? Oftentimes you want to ask a question that would get them talking, because it is in their talking that you're going to understand the real need that they have as a team or as an organization. Okay, a BA has good verbal and non-verbal skills, right? You're good at talking, but you're also very good at listening. Nobody wants to hear you talk all the time, sincerely, no matter how great your communication skills are. You know when to talk, you know when to listen. You have good conflict management skills. You're going to deal with conflict a lot. Sometimes you're meeting with a group of stakeholders and they can't even agree with one another. And you as the BA who called the meeting need to figure out a way to calm them down, but still keep them talking. Okay? And not just with the business, even within the technical team, because you're going to be working closely with the technical team as well. Okay, sometimes the QA is going to disagree with you. The developer is going to say, but your requirement doesn't make sense, right? And you're not going to be offended. Or even if you're offended, you try not to show it, basically. Okay, and you need to be comfortable using communication tools and technology such as Microsoft Office, email, instant messaging, so Teams, Slack, depending on what your organization is using, right? Collaboration tools, knowledge management tools. Now, as you begin taking on contracts or working with companies, you'd be exposed to the tools that they use, right? You learn them as you go. I didn't know a ton of tools when I started as a BA myself, but with each company that I went to, whatever tool they're using, I learn it. When I'm done with that company, I may not even interface with that tool again, at least, or I haven't had to interface with the tool again. But while I was at the company, they'd be like, oh yeah, do you know how to use this tool? Sometimes if I've used the tool before, like if I know what it looks like, I'll be like, yes, I do, but I'm sure I have some learning to do. If I don't know the tool at all, sometimes I'll be very open about it to say, I don't know it, but give me a bit of time with it. I will learn the tool. Okay. Now, let's talk about IT projects, right? An IT project is, is a project that deals with IT infrastructure, information systems, or computers, right? So we talked about your organization implementing an application, say, for example, Salesforce, right? They're implementing Salesforce or they're implementing Kronos or ServiceNow, depending on the company that you're going to, right? I mentioned earlier on, not all projects are IT, but you will find yourself, at least going by my experience, a lot of the companies that I've worked at, I was working with a team trying to implement a new application or trying to grow the application. So let's say within the application, we were utilizing just about 50% of it, and now we want to we want to open up the other 50%, right? And you're going to find yourself working on a lot of projects like that. Think about it this way. At whatever job you're doing right now, there most likely is an application that you're using at that job. A group of people implemented, basically, to implement means to bring the application into use at your organization so that people in the organization can use it, right? A group of people, including most likely a BA, implemented it, and then you came, joined the company, and you're using the tool as an end user. When you start working as a BA and you're working on applications, right, you're going to be the one implementing it for end users to use it. So you know how when you were using that tool, you're like, but who are the people who implemented this useless tool? You don't want people to talk about your projects like that, right? You don't want to have spent 2 years implementing it for someone to say, who are the people who implemented this useless tool? So always think about the end user in whatever implementation you're doing. How are they going to interact with the system? And is it going to be easy for them to use, right? So what are the types of IT projects that we have? We have a type called the commercial off-the-shelf product, okay? That is when your organization goes and buys an application, they buy licenses of the application, right? And they bring it to the organization, they implement it, they tweak it here, they tweak it there, make the interface look like what they want it to look like. But the core of the application was built by another company, and the company just bought it. And that's why we call it commercial off the shelf. A lot of applications are caught, they're commercial off the shelf. The application has already been built, your company buys it and tweaks it. It's almost like when you buy a ready-made suit or a ready-made dress and you just take it to your tailor to make, some adjustments to it. Okay? There is the other option where you're basically creating the requirements. You're meeting with the different departments as a BA. You are gathering all of the requirements together, right? You validate it, you get approval on the requirements, and then you give it to a company to build it. That would be something the types of Deloitte would do. Have you seen, I don't know if you've worked in a company where they say, oh, we're bringing in Deloitte to do the implementation. So you gather all the requirements, your company gathers all the requirements with you as the BA most likely leading it, and then they'll give it to the likes of Deloitte to build it. The third option is where you build it in-house. A lot of companies try not to build anything in-house. The reason being that it can take really long to build an application in-house. While you're building it, people on your team are going to quit, you're going to hire new people, you need to retrain the people. By the time it takes you 5 years to build it, that product might not even be the latest in town anymore. So by going to companies who have already built a solution, right, they've spent a ton of time building it, validating it, making sure it works, right? A lot of companies find it more beneficial, okay, to just go buy that existing tool and do the minor tweaks than building from scratch. Having said that though, all three exist and companies use any option that works for them. When you get hired as a BA and you get on a project, you need to know which category your project is falling into. Okay? You need to know if it's an existing application, SharePoint, Salesforce, Kronos, ServiceNow, whatever it is, right? You need to know, because by knowing, you then have a better understanding of the extra that needs to be done. Okay? So that's that. So what are examples of IT projects? Application development will be one. Software upgrade is one. If you have an iPhone, you have an Android, they're always rolling out upgrades, right? You have a team of QAs and BAs who have worked on it in the back end, and they're pushing it out to you, the end user. There's a migration project where currently everything you do is on site. Now you're moving it to the cloud. You're moving to Salesforce, right? There's infrastructure implementation. You're changing all your servers to the latest server. Okay, and then there's many others. Again, when you get on the job, you see which one they've brought you on. It should be in the job description anyway. And if it's not there, if you read a job description that you don't fully understand, ask questions, and they will be able to tell you. In some cases, the company hasn't even fully determined if they're going to buy an existing application and just do the minor tweaks, or they're going to build from scratch. And so sometimes they'll bring in a project manager and a BA to do some of this research for them. Okay. Why are projects initiated? Why do companies think it's worth it spending all of this money hiring people and, implementing a new tool? Sometimes it's market demand, right? We're implementing a new tool because the tool we're using today can only cater to 50% of the services that we offer. It just isn't working for us anymore. Okay? So we're implementing a new tool to be able to cater to the current market demand. We're implementing a new tool to be able to take advantage of a strategic opportunity. There is an opportunity coming into our industry. Okay, we want to be able to leverage, we want to be able to key in and be the first takers. But we know this tool we're using today can't perform magic. So over the next 2 years, we're going to implement a new tool and position ourselves to be able to take advantage of this opportunity. Sometimes it's due to a business need or to address a pain point. We love this tool, but it's just not working. Like, people are quitting because of how terrible this tool is, right? We have a business need. We're going to implement this project to change the tool. Sometimes it's to improve on the current process. Sometimes it's an environmental consideration. Okay? Sometimes it's a new technology or a legal requirement. There is an audit that companies in our industry go through every 3 years. As part of the audit, there is certain data that we need to provide to the auditors. The tool we use today just is not able to house that data. And every time we fail this audit, we're charged $1 million. Okay? Meaning in the next 3 years, if we fail the audit, it happens every 3 years, it would have cost us $3 million. Would we not rather spend 1.5 million now to implement a new tool and save ourselves the headache of auditors, giving us a bad name? So that is some of the thinking that goes into implementing a project. Now, why do projects fail? There are projects that they've spent $3 million on, and it failed not gracefully, it failed woefully. It happens. Some of the reasons why projects fail is that the scope of the project is not managed properly. So let me tell you an example of a scope creep. Okay, let's say that you're traveling with your family. Okay, you're traveling from point A to point B with your family. This trip is going to be 10 hours of driving, right? You have a little child, and this child needs to eat before you leave. You're setting out at 10 a.m. Okay, for your trip, you're setting out at 10 a.m. You know that your child needs to eat before you set out. So you basically said you're giving your child 30 minutes to eat. They're going to go into this restaurant, they're going to order breakfast, they're going to eat, and then you're heading out. You cannot afford to leave later than 10 a.m. because if you leave later than 10 a.m., you're going to get to your destination late and you're going to miss that meeting you're going for, or whatever it is your family is going for. And when you miss that, that would have been wasted time. You spent 10 hours and you still did not meet up with where you're going. And so you've told your child, you're going to have breakfast. When we get there, you're ordering pancakes. They're going to give you syrup with it, and you're going to order a drink, and you're going to eat it. You're eating light, okay? You take your child to the restaurant and you drop them off. Your child gets into the restaurant and you're giving them $10, right? That breakfast is going to cost $10. And they're going to finish eating their pancake. They're going to be served the pancake and they'll finish eating the pancake in 30 minutes, basically. And you're going to head out. Your child gets in there, sits down, orders pancake, orders hot dogs, orders ice cream, orders four things, right? Now, just think about what this might mean for everything you have planned that day. Number one is that the money you've given your child is not going to be enough to pay for everything they've ordered. The 30 minutes you're giving them is not going to be enough time because it will take longer for the food to be delivered. Okay? Those are two things at the minimum, right? Your child takes an hour to finish eating and they don't have enough money to pay. Not only are you able to leave at 10, your child is now in a situation where they're calling you to bring more money, which you happen not to have on you at that time. The problem with scope creep is that it has a cascading effect. Okay? The contract your family is trying to get, that is now off the table because there's no way you're going to make it on time. Let's bring this back to a project environment. You've done your business case. They've given you $1 million to implement this project. You now start meeting with the business and they want this and they want that and they want an arm and they want a leg and they want so many different things. What do you as a BA need to do to rein it in? Because it will happen, that I guarantee you. There's almost no project anywhere where the end users or the business or your stakeholders are not going to be asking for more than the money you've been given can deliver. Okay? In a later lesson, we're going to get to how you're going to address it. But it's critical for you to understand that scope creep is something that you have to consciously think about as a BA. Every time you walk in there and you're having that conversation about a requirement, the requirement is that we're implementing this new tool that is going to do some calculation for you so that the manual calculation you're doing today, we can cut it out, thereby cutting out the errors you're making today, thereby cutting out the money that the business is losing by overpaying customers. That is the scope of the project. But when you start having the meetings with them, they not only talk about the requirements to meet, what we just talked about, but they're asking for these extra things. When the data gets into the system, we need the system to analyze it. We then need it to generate this report. And when it generates this report, we need it to automatically send it to the finance team. And when it gets to the finance team, it needs to calculate all the percentages for the finance team. And then the finance team does this, and then they send it to, and they're already telling you things worth $3 million. Always remember, you were a part of the business case. You have $1 million. And you need to deliver in that $1 million what the organization has agreed to. Okay? Again, I know I'm emphasizing scope creep a bit. That is because it is something you're going to deal with every day. Just always think about your child. And now you've given them $10 to eat pancake. How are you going to make sure they don't order pancake and hot dogs and ice cream and all of that? If you have to sit with them in the restaurant, so be it. You're going to sit with them. Okay? Another reason why projects fail is unrealistic plan and schedule. We want to implement this project that realistically, based on history and based on anybody who has implemented it before, it will take 2 years on average to deliver it. Your company is saying that they want to deliver it in 8 months. Again, this happens all the time. As a matter of fact, I'm on a project right now where it is happening. Okay? They're going to give you a short time frame to deliver something big. You need to speak up early. Don't be thinking in your mind, but this is not enough time. Oh, they're going to realize it's not enough time. I'm just going to wait for the 8 months to be up and I'll tell them, you see, I told you it's not enough time. No, that is not why they hired you as a BA. They hired you as a BA to be able to do this analysis to say, and it's not going to be you alone. As a matter of fact, a lot of the planning and scheduling will fall on the PM, but you're also there to support the PM. And if the PM missed anything in terms of the schedule, because the PM ideally should own the schedule. If they missed anything, they've given you only 1 month to do requirement gathering. And you're supposed to meet with 7 teams, a total of 25 subject matter experts. We'll go into what subject matter expertise later, but it's really people who are experts in the topic you're trying to understand, okay? They want you to do all of this in 1 month. No, it's not gonna happen. So you're going to speak up as a BA, because if you don't speak up, what would happen is at the end of the 1 month, they're going to tell you, well, you did not deliver. The problem is not that you didn't deliver, it was that they never gave you enough time. But you see, sometimes they don't give you, you take it. If you've looked at the project timeline and you see that the time they're giving you as a BA is not enough, you need to speak up at that point, because that is a project waiting to fail. The other one, which largely sits with the BA, is poor requirement gathering. I am hungry. They told you I'm hungry, and you documented that as a requirement. Again, I'm telling you, this, that is a terrible requirement. If they're hungry, you need to know what time of the day do they eat? What do they eat? How do they eat? How is their food served? Why are you even eating to start with? Maybe you're supposed to be fasting. You need to know all of these things, the how, when, why, who, and all of that. To get to the bottom of the requirement, like, why is this even a requirement? Do we really need to spend part of this $1 million implementing it? And the other part is lack of resources. You're the BA, but they want you to do project management. They want you to double as a Scrum Master. They want you to do QA. They want to turn you into Lord and Master. Push back. Respectfully push back. And this is not just about BA projects generally, right? Sometimes people quit and it takes time for them to find the right person to backfill the role. And so, projects do fail because of that. Okay, where are we? Okay, so we talked about lack of resources, incomplete requirements. Another thing is continuous change in requirement. They'll tell you something today, right? And then as you continue to ask the how, the why, and all of that, it will change. Or sometimes they tell you, oh, you're going to be working with the assistant manager of accounting. And so you've been meeting with the assistant manager of accounting, and you've gathered requirements from your meeting with them. One day, the manager of accounting joined the meeting, and they're like, oh, no, that doesn't happen that way. It happens this other way. But this is 4 months into requirement gathering, and the developers are already building it. And now they want to change requirements, right? Now, while you're not at fault here, one thing you can do as a BA that would help you is talk to the right people. Talk to the people who have the actual information that you want. If you're meeting with somebody and you're beginning to get the feeling that this person doesn't understand the process 100%, I'm just going to take a sip of water. And you're beginning to get the sense that this person doesn't know they don't understand the process enough to be able to give you all of the information that you need. You're better off pulling the right person into the meeting early than waiting till later only to say, oh, but you gave me the wrong requirement. And so even though they gave you the wrong requirement, every time people hear requirement, they tie it to the BA. So when there's a bad requirement, they tie it to the BA. When requirements keep changing, sometimes they want to tie it to the BA, even though it's not your fault. So if requirements change, you're going to tell them, please submit a change request. We're going to go into the details of a change request later on. Okay? Especially if it's a change that's going to require more work from the development team. Or if it's a change that is coming months down the line. They should submit it officially. Let it be on record that you are not the one who got it wrong. They got it wrong from the beginning. And this is not because you're being pet. No. It is that you don't want your name to be on, when the requirement changed, it was Abiola. When the requirement was wrong, it was Abiola. When this happened, it was Abiola. You don't want that to be, you don't want your name being mentioned like that. The other part is lack of user involvement. So sometimes when a project is being implemented, the users are actually not interested. I'll give you an example. And this project I'm going to tell you about, I'm going to talk about it a whole lot more as we go through the class. I think it was a solid project that I worked on, but I also think it was really good experience for me, and I believe it can be for you as well. And when you picture it and you can follow my story, you can actually tell it in, wherever, an interview, wherever you're talking. So I worked at this insurance company where, how you go clean your teeth and you go buy a medication and they give you this receipt that you need to send into the insurance company. That was how they were operating at the time. And so daily they were getting thousands of those papers, and I really mean thousands, and they'll have 5 people sorting through them. Okay, this is dental, this is drugs or whatever they call it, and this is this, and that is orthodontics, and this is this, and that is that, right? It was already a laborious way of working, very inefficient. Then a strike happened. It was a unionized environment. A strike happened. The strike lasted for maybe all of 1 week. But at the end of the strike, just imagine the thousands of claims that they needed to work through. And so the company decided, no, this must never happen again, because it meant people weren't getting paid on time. And for some people that needed to get approval before the procedure could be done, they got delayed. People were unhappy. People complained. And this is supposed to be like one of the leading insurance companies. So what did they do? What they did was that they decided to implement 2 new tools, and it was really cool. So what they did was they implemented something called optical character recognition, okay, and robotics process automation. What is optical character recognition? Optical character recognition is a tool that can extract text off paper. So if you give the tool a typed document, you put it through the scanner of the tool, and the tool says today, and the document says today is a good day. That tool can extract that today is a good day. It can basically read it and extract it. When it extracts it, it passes it on to the next application, which is the robotics process automation. I don't know if anybody on the call has heard about robotics, but robotics is used to do wonders. I've seen it work live myself. It's like magic. Trust me, like magic. So optical character recognition would extract the text, pass it off to robotics process automation, and robotics will take that data and enter it into the application. These 2 tools could go through thousands of papers in a day. So now, what was the current state? The current state was that people were submitting these paper claims. You had like 5 people who would sort here, sort there. When they sort it, somebody would wheel the papers into the elevator, take it to the 4th floor. When it gets to the 4th floor, they do a final sort again. Then somebody will scan it. When somebody scans it, somebody else picks up the image and starts reading it and then manually keys it into the system. This process I just described, it was taking, I don't know, maybe 40 people to do it in one day, just based on the thousands. And not only that, they were making a lot of errors. Because imagine that person looking at the scan, the PDF, and trying to keep the data. I mean, when you've done that for 3 hours, everything starts to blur, right? And by implementing this project, right, optical character recognition and robotics process automation, we basically fed it to these tools. The error rate for the tools was almost non-existent. Why am I telling you all these stories? How do you think that the people currently doing the job felt when they heard that they were going to be replaced by robots? Trust me, they were not happy. As a matter of fact, I would walk into meetings smiling extra and just chatting about family and just trying to get them to relax, because everybody felt they were losing their jobs. And sometimes that is what you're going to deal with as a BA. I kept having to tell them, no, you're not losing your job. We're just going to reprioritize your time. Now we're actually going to use your time for something more fun, something you're going to enjoy doing better. To be honest, some people retired. You know, the company was kind enough to retire a few people early. People who had been doing this for 30 years. They still had 2 years to retire. And they're like, you know what, we'll just give you the money, we retire, you go have fun. But for a lot of the other people, they kept them on. But before they believed that they were actually going to be retained, they first believed they were losing their job. So no, they didn't want to talk to the BA. They didn't want to talk to the PM. They did not want to talk to anybody. Like, I would be walking past and I could hear people talk about me. That's the person gathering the requirements that's going to make me lose my job. So yes, as a BA, you might be faced with that, where the user just doesn't want to talk to you. You need to figure out how to navigate that and get them to your side. You know, lack of executive support. Sometimes, you know, the big ops there will give you the $3 million and they don't show up anymore. That oftentimes impacts the project as well. And other times is improper planning, right? The schedule is unreasonable. The money that you got for the project was not even enough to start with because somebody didn't budget properly. Okay, so how do we go about initiating a project? When you get this document, I'm going to share this document with you at some point. You will be able to click on this link here. It's really just a document on the internet to show you what an RFP, a request for proposal, looks like. What is a request for proposal? When do we use it? Why do we even use it? When our company has decided that they're going to implement a new solution, right? And we've decided that we're not building the solution from scratch. We just don't have the technical skill to be able to do it. And it even makes more sense just buying the solution, right? We send oftentimes what we call an RFP, a request for proposal. We would send it out to companies that we think can deliver. Okay, this is a formal invitation we're sending to them to let them know that we want to implement this tool and we think, that you may be able to deliver. So send us a proposal. This is the need that we have. Tell us how you can meet the need. Okay, the client, which is your company, may meet with companies interested in submitting a proposal to answer any question they have. Because sometimes when you send out the request, the company still has questions, right? Because they want to put their best foot forward. They want to make sure their own proposal is what you select. So they want to ask you the right questions so they can prepare a really solid proposal. When your company receives the proposal from the vendors, right, you will then, and by you, I don't mean just you as the BA, with the technical team, the project manager, basically look at the submissions you received to assess who can really deliver based on the information they've provided to you. Okay. Of the 10 companies or vendors that have submitted proposals, you then create a short list, again, based on the technical evaluation, right? You create a short list and say, of these 10 that submitted, only 4 of them sound like they know what they're talking about, or only 7 of them sound like they know what they're talking about. From that point, you may now do something called a proof of concept, or the other methods of further narrowing down the 7. So remember the project I was telling you about, optical character recognition. So we sent out a request for proposal, and about 5 companies came back and said, we can totally do it, and you're going to be happy by the time we're done. So we're like, yeah, this is a multi-million-dollar project. We don't want to wait till we've spent all the money to find out whether or not you can actually deliver. So we're going to do something called a proof of concept. You're going to come on site. We're going to give you some of those documents that we talked about and show us how your tool can make it happen. This requirement that we have, right? We don't expect you to bring like large servers and all of those things. You're only coming to do it on a small scale. Even if it's 10 claims, we want to see your tool extract the data. We want to see your tool pass the data off to robotics. And we want to see your robotics pass that data into the application for the organization, the application that's actually going to pay the claim. We invited these vendors to come on site. I think we invited 4 of them. 3 of them showed up. As a matter of fact, I, as the BA then, I was the one who actually worked with them. So with the project manager, we had created how we wanted to score them, right? And so when they brought the tools and the tools did the extraction, I basically went through each document that was extracted to see how well the tool did. Okay, the tool that did the best in the proof of concept was the vendor that we gave the contract to deliver. And they did an excellent job. If we did not do the proof of concept and we just said, because they all said you can deliver a many more and try to choose, we may have ended up with one of those companies that didn't have a good result at the proof of concept. Not every company understands how beneficial the proof of concept is. Now, as a BA, you know what a proof of concept is. When they bring you on that project and they're racking their heads trying to understand, okay, what's the criteria for evaluating all these vendors? How do we determine who we're choosing? This is a $5 million project. We can't afford to get it wrong. You can totally tell them, have you considered a proof of concept? Because your project manager may just never have interfaced with a proof of concept before. Okay. Now, when this further shortlist is provided, a single, when it's narrowed down, a single vendor or provider is then, excuse me, is then selected and they're given you basically create what we call a statement of work. You select a single provider, you create a statement of work. Again, by you, I mean you, the project manager, you may be working with other stakeholders, right? You issue that to that provider you selected. The statement of work is what basically indicates the work that needs to be done, over how long, how much you are agreeing to spend on it, and other contract information, right? Everything in that statement of work, you're basically telling the vendor they need to deliver everything on that statement of work. Okay. Now we go into project artifacts. I think we're doing well with time. Now, let's talk generally about some of the documents or artifacts in general that you as a BA, you're going to own it or you may be contributing to it. Some of the documents, you're not the one creating it. They may ask for insight from you. They may ask you to contribute to it. They may ask you to make sure it's maintained, but they don't expect all of that information to come from you. One thing I should mention here is that as we go through this class, we begin to wonder, but how do they expect one person to be able to do all of this? It just sounds like a lot. Am I even going to have a life after becoming a BA? You absolutely will. Think about it this way. You are a business analyst. You are not a solutionist. You are an analyst, meaning what they give you is what you have to work with. And if they've not given you enough, ask for it. But nobody expects you to come up with information on your own. You should not be coming up with information on your own. You should not be coming up with answers on your own. It is not your job. Your job is to talk to the people with the right answers, get it from them, document it, and communicate it to the people who need that information. If you hit a roadblock and something is telling you there's a gap, something is missing, find the person with the information. Don't try to fill the gap yourself. Unless, of course, that the information you need is something they've told you in the past, right? And you can refer to the document. Okay? What is a business requirement document? A business requirement document is what states what the organization is trying to achieve. An example is, we need to increase our customer base by 25% before 2025 so that we can retain our position as an influencer in the market, in the manufacturing industry. Okay? You can see how vague it is, right? We know what we want to accomplish as a company. It doesn't say how we're going to achieve it. Okay? It doesn't talk about the BA or the PM or the accounting department or anybody for that matter. A business requirement document is at the organization level. Oftentimes, it's not your... Oftentimes, when they hire you as a BA, they even already know what the business requirement is. Oftentimes, as a matter of fact, that's why they hired you. That's why they're probably hiring you. Because now they want to take it from that really high level, they want to bring it down to the functional level, which means what are the things that we need to do to achieve the business requirements? Okay, so we talk about the functional requirement document. The functional requirement document is the document where the things that need to happen for the business requirement to be achieved, okay? What are the steps that we need to take for us to achieve the business requirement? That oftentimes is what is documented in the functional requirement document, like the function that needs to be performed. Okay? Example, when the user clicks submit, the form should be routed to the sales team. So at the business requirement level, we know we need to grow our customer base by 25%. Excuse me. But how will that be done in the system? When we get a new lead, right? When we get there's a new customer coming to the company. How do we get them into the system? Okay? And that's so now we're talking at the functional level. Just try to remember the word function. How does it need to function for us to achieve our goal? Then there's a technical requirement document. You really need not worry about this, right? Oftentimes it'd be like the solution architect, the developers that will create and manage this document. But it's good for you to be aware that there is a document like that. An example would be the system should be developed using Java programming language. Honestly, as a BA, I don't care if they use Java or JavaScript. Honestly, I do not care. And I don't think you should care as well. But if you care, it's fine. You can care. It's just not part of your job, really. Okay? Then we talk about a project plan. Every project should have a project plan. The project plan is usually managed by the project manager. You as a BA need to know what is in the project plan though, even though it's managed by the project manager. You need to know, the concept phase at the project kickoff. When is the project kickoff going to start? This project plan shows that it's going to start on the 6th of February. Okay? And then the requirement, the requirement elicitation is going to start on the 6th of February. So usually, how a project plan looks like in real life is that the part that says requirement specification, I don't know if this is big enough and you can see it, but if it's not very clear, you'll be able to see it when I share the document with you. Okay, the requirement specification may go from like February to April. And as a BA, that tells you that is how much time you have to document the requirement, okay, to validate it, to verify it. The project plan basically just shows what needs to happen in the project, when it needs to happen, and how much time you have for it to happen. So if you're looking at a project plan and you don't see anything for requirement gathering or requirement specification, and they hired you, you should be asking yourself, when in this timeline am I supposed to elicit requirements? And that question should be going to the project manager. Okay. This oftentimes is what a project plan would look like, but sometimes it may look different. The most important thing is that the project plan should itemize everything that needs to happen in the project, from conceptualizing the project to implementing it and then closing the project. It should list all of that. It should list when it's going to happen and the duration. Okay. So let's look at 7 reasons why project plans matter. Okay. One is that it clarifies the process and the activities. In a project, something needs to happen before another thing. Developers cannot code when there's no requirement. So if you look at a project plan and development is listed before requirement gathering, that is wrong. It is just wrong. You can't eat before preparing the meal. Okay? The project plan enables you visualize the entire project. Like at a glance, you can see from beginning to end, what are the different things that need to happen in this project. It also provides milestones, right? And the good thing with the milestones is that it lets you know what needs to happen by when. So let's say that requirement gathering should end in March, according to the project plan, but they hired you mid-March. Be concerned. My advice is be concerned. You're not going to have 2 weeks, excuse me, to meet all the stakeholders, get familiar with them, and gather all the requirements. Unless, of course, they gathered all the requirements before they hired you, and then they've given it to you to follow up on it. Okay? It enables everybody to have an agreement. Sorry, I'm not going 1 and 2. I'm just reading left and I'm reading right. It enables everybody to be on the same page. Most importantly, on when the project is going to go live. What does it mean to go live? Go live means we've spent 1 year implementing this project, building it in the background, going back to the business, showing it to them, getting the agreement. But at some point, we need to push the system out to people to use the same way Apple is pushing that update to you. Even though you got that update last week, Monday, they've been working on it for 1 year and you did not even know that they had been working on it. But then it goes live, they push it to production. And when they push it to production, it appears on your phone. And you're like, oh, there's a new update, I should update my phone. Okay, a project plan gives you information that enables you to estimate properly and define a project output. So sometimes you see a project plan being tweaked by the project manager. Something has taken 1 week longer. It's going to have a cascading effect on every other thing, right? Because the next item can't start until this one finishes. The project manager needs to figure out how he's going to deal with that 1 week spill that they have. A project plan helps you show who does what when and forecast your resource requirements. So the example that I showed you didn't have anybody's name on it, but some project plans do have it. That way, anybody can look at it and say, oh, okay, Abiola is in charge of requirements. If I have any questions about requirement, I'll go talk to her. Okay, and it enables you baseline a project and track the progress, right? According to the project plan, by the end of September, we should be having our final round of testing. Okay, but based on where we are right now and September almost beginning, we know that we're already a month behind. If you don't have a project plan, there is no way for you to know that. Again, bear in mind, the project plan is not yours to manage. You could get pulled in to contribute to it, but sometimes if the project manager isn't able to show up for any reason, it may fall on you. You know, the optical character recognition project that I talked to you about, I was the BA on that project, but the project manager lost her mother-in-law and she had to be away. And I was just next in line to take it over. If I didn't know what the project manager was doing, I would have been lost. So I'm not saying neglect your job as a BA and focus on project management. I'm saying be aware, know what the PM is doing as much as your schedule permits. Okay. Project artifacts continue. So there's something called a project initiation document. And that's a document that not every organization uses it, by the way, but many of them do. That is a project that defines the scope of the project. Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what are the issues that may arise as part of this project? And it includes other crucial information as well. Usually a project initiation document might be 2 pages or 10 pages, right? When you join a project, ask, is there a project initiation document? There needs to be a document they're going to show you when you join the project. Because think about it this way. They hired you for a reason. Where is that reason documented? Where is the reason for this project? Right? That now made them think that they needed to hire a BA and a PM and a developer and all of that. By reading that document, it gives you an idea what the project is about. And you as a BA, because you've never worked on a project like this, but by reading that document, you start doing your research. Okay? You need to know what the project is about. You cannot just focus on yourself as a BA. As a matter of fact, there is no way you could do your job properly as a BA without knowing what the project is about, the scope of the project, the business case for the project, the risk, and other important information. We've talked about a proof of concept. A proof of concept, again, is a pilot project on a small scale that examines if an activity can actually be done or a concept can be realized. So as much as the insurance company at that time knew that they needed a change and they needed it badly, maybe there was no solution out there that could meet their need. I mean, fortunately for them, there was a solution, right? And by doing the proof of concept, we were able to ascertain that there was a solution or, a suite of solutions they could implement to meet their need. Process flow diagram is another document, right? And this is a document that shows the flow of communication or activities or tasks within a process. So remember when I talked about you're meeting with the accounting manager and you're like, so tell me about the process you do in your department. They tell you about the process and either you're recording or you're writing it out. And so it'd be like, when the assistant manager logs in the morning, there is a report that would have been pushed to their email. They would open that report. It's in Excel. They will calculate the totals. They would create a pivot table. After creating the pivot table, they will write a summary of it. They will send it to the finance department. And they're telling you line by line, all of these things, right? Of course, as they're telling you, if you feel like there's a disconnect between step 7 and step 8, you'd ask them, they'll give you more information. When you get all of that information and you get back to your desk, you're going to clean it up, write it out nicely. But another thing BAs do, which stakeholders like a lot, is that they map it out. They map it out. Like they say, a picture speaks volumes, right? And I'll show you process mapping, later on in the class, right? And so process flow diagram is one of the tasks that BAs do. To map out a process, you're basically drawing it out. Some people don't like text. They don't want to read one page. They're like, show me a picture. Okay, there's something called requirement traceability matrix, and that is it sounds like a table that you can use to trace your requirements. And what it helps you as a BA, what it helps you do is that it shows you where you missed the requirements. That's one of the things that it does anyway. And it also shows you where you've gathered the requirement, but the requirement has not been implemented. Okay, so it's a way for you to trace your requirements. You've gathered it, now it's gone to the development team. Have they developed it? Now it's gone to the testing team, and you're basically tracing that requirement through its life cycle. And then there's use case and use story. So let's see. Use case and use story is a big topic, so I'll save that for now. Okay, let's look at wireframe. Okay, we're going to wrap up the class soon so we can take your questions. Wireframe. Wireframe, again, is another tool that a lot of companies like. So we want to create this landing page, excuse me, or we want to create this registration page. Before we start getting a team of developers to build it, they may ask a BA to draw it out. There are different tools out there that is used for wireframing. One of them is, the last one that I use is called Balsamic, like the spice. And with that tool, Balsamic, you basically map it out. No, sorry, you draw it out. When you draw it out, you show it to the end users. And the end users will be like, yeah, can you move the logo to the right? Or can you move the logo to the left? Or can you put registration above login? And all of that. That's a cheaper or a less expensive correction to make than if you've actually built it in the system and they're like, can you move the logo? In your mind, they're like, no, I can't move you can't be telling me about move the logo now, 3 months down the line. Of course, you're not going to say that to them, but that's what you're thinking in your mind. So to avoid stories like that, you're going to map it out, okay, with a tool. If your company uses a tool, and if your company doesn't use a tool, draw it out on paper and show it to them. Let them move the logo on paper. You're paying your developers $120 an hour. You don't want them spending 1 month developing only for the business to say, move the logo to the right. Move the logo to the right alone might cost $20,000. As the BA, you don't want that to happen. So where you can, do a wireframe, show it to them, get their approval, and then include that wireframe as part of what you're sharing with the developers. Of course, the developers are still going to tweak things, right? Because they're the ones developing it. They're the ones who know the constraints of the system and what the system can do, even from a design standpoint. But at least get the buy-in of the business on what the design should look like. I mean, get their insight, get their preference on what it should look like. So even the likes of Apple and Android that push out all these things to us, and it feels like we don't have a say, I believe that they have a group of users that they show these things to get some of the feedback before they push it out to the millions and millions of people. Plus, at the end of the day, if they push it out and you don't like it, there's not much you can do about it. These companies are really big, but companies like to get, feedback from users before they spend thousands on building things. So that's wireframing. We're actually done lesson 1. Wow. And this is 7:23. Okay, so if you give me a second here. Okay, cancel that. Okay, so do we have any questions? You can can people unmute themselves, or are you going to unmute them?
They can. And thank you so much, Abiola. This was such an interesting class. In fact, I was also wondering. I know you mentioned during the class. Do you intend to share the slides? because I believe it's very helpful.
Yes, I will be sharing the slide. So I have to be honest with you. I'm not very eager to share the slide at the beginning of the class because I feel like people are going to be focusing on the slide. But I definitely will share it, and I'll share it sooner rather than later, just so you can refer to it as well.
Awesome. So I think we'll start when.
Okay.
Hi, Mano, you can actually unmute yourself.
Hi, Abiola.
Hello.
This is Emmanuel. Thank you very much for this opportunity as well. I really appreciate the class as well. So far, so good. It's actually like an eye opener for me. The question that I have, I think it's just about 2 questions or thereabout. I was wondering, so what is the impact of, in Agile? How does, a BA get involved in that on a project? Or probably is Agile being practiced in, and within the BA, domain?
Okay.
And I think the second, okay. So
no,
I think
go
the
ahead,
second question,
ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So the second question is, you showed us something recently now about the wireframe.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds like a prototype to me, if I'm correct, right?
So let me start with your first question.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have a class where we're going to go into details of Agile, but I can definitely speak a bit about it. A lot of projects today follow the Agile methodology. And just to give people a bit of background information, the 2 core methodologies that companies use is Waterfall or Agile. A lot of companies are following Agile today. And so what's happened is that Waterfall is a methodology where, let's say you have a project that is going to take you 2 years to implement, right? In Waterfall, typically, you continue building that solution until you're done after the 2 years before you push it out to your end users. Waterfall works well where the company knows the requirement really well already, okay? And so they go with Waterfall. The problem a lot of companies were running into with Waterfall is that they were finding issues with what they built 2 years down the line. So it's almost like you're building a car, right? And so you've put in the engine, you've put in the doors. When you put in the engine, you didn't try to test drive it without the doors. Mm-hmm. You didn't get any end user to give you any feedback. And so you put every other thing only to find out the engine isn't working. And so for you to be able to get to the engine, you're having to rip the car apart. And so companies were finding, one, that was an issue. The second thing is that, especially for waterfall projects that were lasting really long, was that by the time they were done building the project wasn't even relevant anymore. We live in an ever-changing world. Things are changing so fast. Look at even the phone companies, right? Where is Nokia today, right? And so people are moving away from anything that's going to take so long that people can't even remember you were trying to give them a solution. And so they started going to Agile. What is Agile? Agile is just like the word Agile, right? We're doing it faster and we're releasing things faster. We're going to make you a burger. We know a burger is what you want to have for lunch, right? A burger and fries. And you like to have ice cream after it. We're not going to wait till the burger and the fries and the ice cream and everything is done. By that time, you're probably dead of hunger or dead from hunger, right? And so when the burger is ready, we bring it to you. As a matter of fact, when the bread is ready, we give you a piece of the bread and we say, give us some feedback on the bread. Is it fluffy enough? Is that what you want? Should we make it a bit firmer? We're getting early feedback. So by the time we give you that burger, you're wowed. You don't even want to go somewhere else to eat. All you want to do is to come back to our restaurant. But how did we achieve it? Because we kept getting early feedback from you. We didn't wait till the whole burger is done before we found out you're vegetarian. And we already put meat in your burger. So again, Emmanuel, we're going to talk a bit more about Agile later on, so I'll save the rest for that. But in a nutshell, that is Agile. So we'll talk about, what is the role of a BA in an Agile environment. We'll go into the details of all of that. For your second question, prototyping is not always the same as wireframing. Wireframing is that thing I showed you All it is a picture, nothing more.
Okay.
We create anything. That picture I just got off the internet and I showed you. That is wireframing. You're drawing. Prototyping oftentimes is you're creating a mini version of that solution, right? With wireframing, I create wireframes all the time. Trust me, I couldn't create a prototype. I wouldn't even know where to start from. So wireframing is just drawing, basically.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Justin Akonde.
Oh, sorry, it's Justina.
Justina, I'm sorry, it's Justina. I'm sorry.
Hi, Abiola. Thank you so much. This was a very enlightening class. Actually, spiked my interest. Okay, anyways, I have two questions. The first one being, okay, remember when you talked about a change, when you were like, okay, if you have a change, please submit a change request?
Yeah.
Okay, so in that situation, does that automatically guarantee an extended time frame? Because obviously they are changing stuff. So, wouldn't that cost us more time? Or do you have to work with what you've got?
Okay. Should I go ahead and answer that first? Because you have two questions. Okay, so, excuse me, them submitting a change request doesn't mean it's going to get approved. As a matter of fact, most change requests are rejected. But you're still going to tell them to submit a change request because that is the right process to follow. When they submit a change request, it's not for you to decide. You're going to submit it to the decision makers. You're going to tell the decision makers this change they're asking for is going to undo 1 month of work. It was not an original requirement. This requirement has just surfaced today. And they're basically changing what they've said in the past. That is your job as a BA. If the powers that be decide to approve it, knowing it's going to delay the project by 1 month and it's going to cost $100,000 more, that is above your pay grade. Let them do what they want. But at least they're aware. Your job as a BA is to help them understand the impact, the potential impact of them approving that change. That is where your job ends. And of course, whatever the decision is, you want to communicate it back to the person who requested the change. You should never approve a change request. You get it, you submit it to who you need to submit it to. You don't want your name on it. Okay? And like I said, oftentimes it's rejected anyway, and the user is not going to be happy, and you're going to be extra nice to them and make them feel better. Sometimes the change request is approved because by not approving it, the project has failed. Some changes are that critical. In that case, you're going to help the powers that be understand how it is important for them to approve the change, even though it's going to impact the timeline and all of that. You will let them know. And sometimes it may not impact the timeline because they'll just hire one more person. I'm currently working on a project where they keep ringing it into our ears. Nothing on earth is going to move the go-live date of this project. Whatever reason we like to come up with, nothing is going to change. And the funny thing is there's so many issues arising right now that I think it'd be a miracle for the project to go live. But you know what? If the project pass that we say nothing is going to shift it, well, it's their decision. Nothing is going to shift it. But I will communicate the change that has been requested. I will communicate every issue that's rearing its head, every risk that has come to that is actually happening. I will highlight it because that is my job. So I hope I answered your question there.
Yes, and then you brought me to a B question for this one. So are you saying that in the project plan, like there's nothing like when we get to this phase, no more changes can be made?
Oh, yes. There's something called a change freeze. Now that you asked, I'll talk about it, but it's in the plan to talk about it later. There is usually a place in the project plan where they would indicate a change freeze, meaning come what may, nothing will change.
Good.
But I tell you that if a change is required to the point that if the change is not made, the project will fail. Why would you not do the change though? So these things are very tricky. It's not black and white. What I want you to get out of this is that change requests are hardly ever approved.
Okay.
As a BA, you need to ask the right questions and ask these questions to the right people. That's the way to avoid a lot of change requests coming in. You don't want to look bad as a BA. If something is not making sense to you, it is one of two things. It either genuinely doesn't make sense or you as a BA don't understand it. You need to find out which one it is, and you need to get to the bottom of it. Now, there's some change requests that will come in that has nothing to do with you having done your job badly. The people just didn't know, and they didn't communicate it to you. When those come in, tell them, submit a change request and submit it to the powers that be. If the change is coming at a point where we've passed the change freeze period, still communicate it. Communicate it to the project manager. Always communicate it to somebody, because that way it doesn't fall on you. Nobody comes back later and says, oh yeah, we told Justina, did she never tell you? You don't want that to be you. So what's your second question?
That makes total sense. Thank you. Okay, so my second question is, remember when you said sometimes people could just resign, or for example, that lady who lost her mother-in-law, you know. So let's say in this case, it was a BA who just resigned, and then you just got hired with the company. Is it, let's say they've moved past, you know, at the project plan, they're at an advanced stage. So is it advisable to adopt a previous BA's gathered requirements, or is it better to start afresh and then gather your requirements as opposed to adapting previous BA's?
Yeah, starting afresh is almost never an option, because everything about a project is time, right? They had allocated 4 months to gather requirements. BA1 quits 3 months. You have 1 month. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that requirement that BA1 gathered, and you're going to take it back to the business to validate it. Is it correct? You don't want to start from scratch. One, for 2 reasons. One, you're not going to have the time. And 2, the people you're talking to are not going to like you. Business people don't like repeating themselves. They do not. I can tell you that. Because when you ask them, they'll be like, yeah, but I told this other person, was it not documented? Because a lot of them talking to you is not part of their job requirement. When they're not talking to you, they still have to go do their own work. You are talking to them, that is your job, right? But when they are done talking to you, they still have to do their own job. So you have to be very conscious of their time, right? Reuse requirements where you can, but always validate it, because those requirements will end up having your name, right? So spend time validating and verifying it rather than trying to start from scratch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Shola, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question? Okay, we'll go to Abiola.
Hi, Abiola.
Oh, hi, Shola.
Oh, no, this is Abiola.
Oh, okay. Hi, Abiola. Sorry about that.
That's fine. So my question is, may I ask the minimum time needed as a BA to gather requirements for a project? I know projects differ, right? But then what would be the minimum requirements? I'm just asking in order to avoid, unnecessary pressure.
Unnecessary stories, right?
Unnecessary pressure, yeah.
So there is no exact answer to that question. It depends on the size of the project. If we're implementing a tool, right, that is we're rolling it out across 10 departments within the organization, it will take a whole lot longer to gather the requirements for that compared to if we were rolling it out to one department. So for you to be able to have an idea of how much time will be needed, there are certain things you need to look at. Number one, how wide are we rolling it out? Are we integrating this solution with an existing solution or another solution? For example, when I did optical character recognition, I wasn't only gathering requirements for optical character recognition, but we were integrating it with robotics process automation, and we were integrating it with the line of business application. I already told you 3 applications right there, and that's not all. So those are the things that you'd look at to be able to gauge how long. You really can't just look at a project and say, oh, will it be 3 months or will it be 3 years? It really depends on the complexity of the project. And usually you as the BA are not the one who would say how much time you need. That time will be allocated to you. You as the BA then need to look at the timeline and how much work they've given you. They've said 10 departments and this and that and that and that and that. And if you don't know, phone a mentor. Your mentors have been in the industry for 10, 15 years. Tell them about the project. They will be able to tell you how much time you can expect to spend on it, and even tell you build a 10% buffer into that. Okay, Abiola?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Shola, are you ready? Shola, we can't hear you. You did unmute, but we can't hear you. Okay, we'll come back to you in a second. Valerie.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Bella. Okay, my question is, are there like guides, towards gathering these requirements?
So when you say guides, what exactly?
Okay, like a while ago you mentioned, and also I think you're talking about the project plan. So as a BA, do you have like a guideline like you follow in gathering these requirements?
Okay, I think I have an idea what you're asking. So basically,
I'm talking from a beginner point of view.
Right, yeah. So basically, these are the two things I'll tell you. There really isn't any guide anyway, but these are two things you need to bear in mind. One is when you as a BA walk into a meeting to gather requirements, the number one thing you're trying to understand is how do you do what you do? How? What we do here is that we make burgers. How do we make the burgers? We bake the bread, we cook the meat, we add ketchup to it, we put lettuce, we put tomatoes, we put this, we put that. Line by line, let them walk you through what they do. Sometimes you're not talking to them, you're basically watching them. You tell them it's called observation. And we're going to go into requirement gathering techniques. Maybe that's what you're even asking me. What are the techniques that you can use to get the requirement? We have an entire class dedicated to that. We're going to go over that. But the two most important things you need to bear in mind is one, my goal here is to understand what they do. I need to understand what they do, the step by step. And I need to understand how they do it. The reason why I need to understand what they do is that they still need to be able to do most of it in the future. If I don't understand it, I'm not going to give them an opportunity to be able to do it in the future because I don't even know that they do it today. And the reason I need to understand why they do it is that sometimes there may be laws that they're following, which is making them do it that way. Meaning that even though we're giving them a new system in the future, they still need to be able to do things a certain way. Start with the what and the how. Let the why, the when, the who, let that follow. But like I said, we have an entire class dedicated to how do you go about gathering requirement? What are the different tools? If you're doing an interview, how should you go about doing an interview? How should you prepare for it? So I believe that I may be answering your question better there, but I hope I gave you an idea of what you're looking to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Yes,
fantastic. No problem. Okay. Any other questions from raised hands before I check in the chat? Shola, your hand is still raised. If you do not have a question, can you please lower your hand so I don't keep calling your name? Oh, your hand is raised. Go ahead, please.
So with respect, when you spoke about the robotics project with the insurance company, with the proof of concept aspect, you mentioned that you invited some people to present proofs of concepts, and you selected one based on your requirements. Now, that looks similar to what normal bid evaluation or tender evaluation looks like. But then, are you evaluating based on your minimum requirements or their ability to deliver?
No, we're evaluating based on even say 90% of our requirement. At that point, when you're bringing people in to do a proof of concept, you've passed the minimum requirement level because whoever you choose at that point, they're the ones who will deliver the solution. So let's say you have 10 requirements. Sorry, can you hold on a second, please?
Sure.
Okay, so let's say you have 10 requirements and you do a proof of concept and one person is able to deliver 2, another person is able to deliver 3, and one other vendor is able to deliver 5. All of them failed. Your business cannot run on 50% delivery. So you're looking for, in our case, when we did the proof of concept, the vendor we went with passed at 90%. I personally collated the results. Okay. And that was the vendor. I did a presentation to executive management and I displayed all the results, and it was glaring to everybody who we needed to go for. So it's not about minimum viable product here. For the benefit of everyone in class, minimum viable product just means what is the minimum that would work? Okay? No, here we're looking at who can deliver to the max. This is the person we're going to give our $3 million to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Olaide?
Hi, Biola. So just like a follow-up to what Yasina asked. So for the proof of concept, is there like when you're picking the companies that you want to come and present present the requirement that you've asked for, is there like how do you pick them? Like, is it based on something that the proposal that they send, or like, or market research, or like what's the basis for?
So it's a combination of many things, right? Some companies have already made their name. Everybody knows Salesforce, right? They don't even need to do any marketing. So let's say we're trying to move to a cloud and we're in an industry that Salesforce services, right? It's a no-brainer. We're probably going to invite them. They already have the name. We almost do not even need to do any research outside of finding out if the application can meet our need. Okay, but that's one way. Another way is when you get the RFPs back. Remember, we talked about request for proposal. When they all send in their proposal, because in that proposal, they're going to tell you what they can deliver. They'll tell you about their tool and the capabilities of the tool in respect to the solution that you need. And then you evaluate them based on that. Because vendor A does not know what vendor B has said, right? And vendor B does not know what vendor C has said. Everybody's going to try to be the best. It's almost like, inter-house sport and you have the kids running, right? Everybody's going to try to outdo one another, basically. But nobody knows what the other person wrote. So you're going to look at all of that as well. But like I said, some companies, because a lot of times these things are audited, right? Companies still have to go through the RFP. And when they do the RFP, 10 companies are going to respond. If Deloitte is one of the people that responded, or like a Salesforce is one of the people that responded, these companies have been around long enough, or they have solid talent, so solid that when they submit an RFP, they floor everybody, basically, if you know what I mean. So it's a combination of all these different things that your company is now going to look at and say, okay, these are the 5 that we want to invite to move to the next stage.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Biola.
Okay. So now there are no other raised hands. I'm going to look at the questions we have in here. Okay, let me see. Manuel said, who approves or disapproves a change request? The PM, I guess, absolutely not. The PM is as powerless as the BA when it comes to change requests. Usually, they have a change request committee, or like a change management board is what they usually call them. It may be the project sponsor, the project manager can be a part of it, but usually no one person has that power to make that decision. It's usually a group of people that they bring together. And the board will typically be scheduled to meet maybe every week or every other week. And it is at that point, they review all the changes, all the change requests that have been submitted and decide on which one they would approve. Manuel, does that answer your question? I'll take that to be a yes. Shola, in the chat, you said, I'll try again tomorrow. I don't know why you can't hear me. Shola, if you're still on, can you please post your question on here? We want to make sure we get to your question today. We really, really would like to hear your question. So if you're okay with it, please post your question in here. Manuel said, yeah, the cab, yeah. Okay, Maya, you have your hand raised. Maya,
that's Maya.
Yeah. My question was, during the course of the class, there were a lot of terminology used, and from someone that has no experience whatsoever, it's kind of confusing.
Okay.
So at what point are we going to talk about, these terminologies we're using so that what you're saying can make sense to an average person that has no BA, PM, Scrum background?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So as the terminologies were used, they were actually explained. So I'm hoping that everybody was attentive enough to listen to the terminology. Having said that, the PowerPoint is going to be shared with everybody, and you get an opportunity to see the meaning of the terminologies again. The expectation as well is not that you would leave it at what is taught in class. We're hoping you actually take it away and do a bit more research and read online about it. But Maya, you're correct. As we continue on in the class, we're going to make sure that, at least I'll speak for myself, I try not to use the terminology without giving context or even using it in an example, and I'll continue to do so. If there's a terminology that I've used, and even though I explained it, it's still not making sense, I need you to ask me about the terminology. I couldn't possibly assume that nobody understood any terminology that I've used. I'm hoping that is not the case. But if that is the case, I want you to tell me in class. I'm all for modifying the way that I'm doing my lessons so that people are getting the most out of it. Okay, Maya, so we're hoping that by the end of the class, you won't be confused and you actually feel like a tenured BA. So like I said, if you're confused about the terminology, it's a lot of terminology, to be honest, I know, but there's no way around it. The terminologies that you will need to learn as a BA. Okay, so just try to follow as I speak about the terminologies, and when I share the PowerPoint, you get another opportunity to look at them and go online, talk about them. But most importantly, ask me in class if I've explained it in a way that doesn't make sense. I will re-explain it. That is my job here. I will re-explain it. Maya, does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're wrapping up now. Do we have, okay, Shola said, just want to know how often a BA should cross-check requirements with stakeholders, considering they don't like repeating themselves. Is it okay to just document requirements gathered and from whom? Okay, that's a very good question. Absolutely, they do not like repeating themselves. But when you're checking with them to validate the requirements, right, what will typically happen is you've met with them over 1 hour and you're having a chat, and you're understanding their process and you're getting all the requirements, right? After the meeting, you go away with the requirements and now you're documenting it. As you're documenting it, even you are going to have some questions. You'd realize that there is a disconnect in between some of the things that they told you, right? And so you have a follow-up meeting with them. Usually you don't meet with a stakeholder just once over the duration of a project. Sometimes you're meeting with stakeholders over a 1 month period, twice a week or once a week. And so you're going to go over like any gaps in your understanding, excuse me, or any questions that you have, right? And you're going to say things like, oh, during our last meeting, you told me about this process. You mentioned that when the assistant manager does A, B happens. When I was documenting it, I realized that I had this follow-up question for you. That's how you're going to ask it. You're not going to go to them and say, so you said the assistant manager said A, is that correct? And the assistant manager said B, is that correct? If you do that, they're going to decline your next meeting. You're going to tell it like a story. Last week when we met, you gave me a lot of information that I found really helpful in capturing the requirements for your team. In reviewing the requirements, I realized that there may be a step missing in between point A and point B. Can you tell me a bit more about this process? Who actually does it and when does it happen? When you swing it that way, they don't get annoyed with you, right? And they may even say, oh, I thought I mentioned that during the last meeting, but if I didn't, I'm more than happy to tell you about it again. And then they will tell you about it. Some stakeholders, you meet them on an angry day. It is what it is to deal with it and you move on. But usually when you swing the question from the angle of what you told me last week was fantastic, I just need a bit more, then you don't annoy them, basically. Shola, can you put a yes or a no if I answered? If you said thanks, Abiola, so I'll take it that I answered your question. Maya, your hand is still raised. Did you have another question or you just did not lower your hand? Okay, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for your time. I'll let you go. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I look forward to connecting with you tomorrow. Come to class with your questions. People, that is what we're here for. That is what we're here for. By the time we're done this class, we need to be chasing down those 6 figures. We need to be doing that. So I look forward to connecting with you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Abiola. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Very much.
Bye.
Bye.